Hey YouTube, today I want to talk about the Datastore and Sync API that were recently deprecated from Dropbox. And that means you might have to switch to another technology or upgrade your code to support the new core API. One alternative is to use Couchbase Mobile. And this is divided into three steps: the Couchbase Lite component, which is the persistence layer on the device itself, so local, and then Sync Gateway, which is the cloud persistence, and to make it shareable and accessible to all your users. So, I've got this app here called Lists iOS, and it's a to-do list to show how to use the Sync and Datastore API. And what I want to do is clone it to a repo in the developer folder. We can open it in Xcode. Oh. I have two storyboards, one for iPhone, one for iPad, app delegate, the lists view controller, and the list view controller. I'm going to run the app, and here you can see there's no list at all. So I can create a new list, and in that list I can add to-dos. And then I can share. Oh, I have to share a list, you'll need to link to Dropbox. Okay. Okay, I can link to Dropbox. Okay, and now I can change the access control of that presumably data store. So those are all the data stores my account had access to before, and they just got synced to the local device. That's pretty neat. What's the first step in switching to Couchbase Lite? First, we'll want to include the Couchbase Lite library. To keep it simple, because CocoaPods is awesome, we can use CocoaPods. So we're going to use a pod file. We're going to run pod init to create the pod file. And to add the Couchbase Lite library, we can use the search command. This will give us the line we can add to our file. Right here. And then we can run pod install. Please close any current Xcode sessions. Yes. Let me close this one because we need to open the workspace now that CocoaPods has been added as a sub-project. So the list view controller holds the logic to display the list of data stores I have access to as a user, and that's it really. Let's have a look here. There's the table view delegate, table view data source. That's probably where we'll change most of the code. Number of rows in section. That's basically returning the list of data stores. And then the property we use is a title on the data store info. Because, if I recall correctly, with the Datastore API, you can hold some metadata, and so title is one of those properties that's available. So the equivalent here is going to be a document, because the single unit of data you can store in Couchbase Lite is a document. The first thing is to import Couchbase Lite, and in the view.didLoad method, we can set up the database. Actually, before we do that, we can add a property here, and then we can define it in the view.didLoad. So to define a database, we use the CBL manager class. Ooh, sorry, a bit. And then database named, passing in the name of the database we want to create. So let's call it lists app. Okay, then the view did appear. I can delete that because that's essentially setting up an observer to reload the table view when new documents have changed from the data store, which presumably means that new documents have been pulled from the Dropbox backend. So we won't need that. And the view will disappear. Remove the observer in the same way I can delete that. These two lines, I'll comment them out for now. And the next thing we'll want to do is to set up a live query. A live query is a bit like the observer that was just here in the view will appear method. Essentially, we get a callback every time via KVO in the case of iOS, every time the result of a query has changed, because the new documents were pulled from Zing Gateway or because they were saved locally. So I'm going to add a new property called live query to the class, and I'm going to initialize it in the view.load. I'm going to use the create all documents in query method. Oops. So that returns a query, but I actually want a live query. So I'm going to call the as live query as well. The all document query is a baked in, is the first query that ships with Couchbase Live. Once you have the live query, you can add an observer, which will be this same class on the rows property. Options will pass in 0 for now, and context, that's important when you want, if you have several queries, you want to know which one is coming from which object. So the global variable here will be the live query context. Oh, sorry. So we can pass in the context here in the live query, in the add observer method. To actually get the results and update the table view, we can use the observe value for key path method, and the context in this case will be the query context. We can access the result of the query on the query itself and via the rows property. So the rows returns, you can see here, the CBL query enumerator. We prefer to store the model as an NS array, so we can use the all objects property, and actually would want to save that on the result. So add the result property NS array to the class results. Yes. Next, reload the table view. Reload data. Damn it, I keep thinking in Swift. Okay. So that should work. We should have this triggered and reloaded every time we create a new document. Now let's update the data source to reflect that. The number of rows in section will be the count of the array, self.results count. The self of row at index path will use an add list type cell if it's in the first section, so that's when you're adding the new list. If it's an existing list, it will use the list cell, and we don't really need the Datastore code here, so we can delete this. Instead, we will get back a CBL query row which will be stored in the result. So object at index will be the index path.item. And from there, we'd want to have a document, obviously, so a CBL document. And that's just the document property on the row. And the text label can now store the property for key string, which will be title. We haven't actually created those documents yet, but that's what will happen. Let's try and build, see if everything's all good. Great. And now the last method we have to change is the text field should return. That's the UI text field delegate method, which is called whenever we close the keyboard. So when the user presses enter. And here, essentially, the data store was being created and the title set on it and synced. In the same way, we can delete this. And we'll create a new document. Actually, just call it new list. And to create the document, we have to use a database and call the create document method on that database. Before we actually save the property, we create a dictionary which will hold the properties stored on that document. So first one will be a title, and that will be the text field text. And then we can call the put properties method, passing in the properties, nil as an error in this case. And let's see if it builds, yes. Let's see if this works. Yes, so the list is saved. We can try and create another list. Now, let's see what we should add to make them sync to the cloud. So that's where Sync Gateway comes into the picture. Sync Gateway is conforms to the CouchDB API, plus a whole range of other methods to handle user management, user authentication, and filtering of documents. So the idea is that you download the Sync Gateway from the Couchbase downloads page in the community edition. All right, So let's have a look. So we have a bin folder which holds the binary. That's the Sync Gateway executable. Sync Gateway is written in Go, which means it's very easy to package and run on all the platforms. And examples holds a bunch of example config files which are passed into Sync Gateway when you start it. So the admin party means that everyone has access to the database and there's no restriction on security and authorization. So that's what we're going to use in this example. But you can see there's actually more complex scenarios, like if we want to cluster config, so different Couchbase servers, and then a sync function, which is significantly more complex. And that's where all the filtering, validation, and user authentication happens. So yeah, check them out. They are really useful when you get started. So I'm going to move the admin party JSON, the one we'll use here, in my lists iOS copy folder. And next I will run the executable, passing in the admin party JSON. We can see here that we're using Walrus, which means that everything is stored in memory. As soon as we shut down Sync Gateway, all the data that was persisted to it is deleted. It's very convenient for development. And the admin server is running on port 4985. Public port is running on 4984. And in the application did finish launching with options method, that's where we want to set up the replications to pull and push to Sync Gateway running locally in the machine. So we can delete the Datastore related code and get an instance of our database again. So first of all, import the Couchbase Lite framework. I think I called it lists app in the other view. Obviously, you could have a singleton which returns the same instance of the database every time, but here just to make it simple, we're opening the same one. Once we have the database, we create replication. So replicators, sorry, but the class is called CBR replication. So the first one will be a push. And the push is going to obviously need a URL, so we can create this one right here, sync URL. That will be HTTP localhost 4984/DB. Now we can pass in the sync URL. We're also going to set it to be continuous, which means it's going to keep listening for changes on the local database and push them accordingly to Sync Gateway, and then finally call the start method. Actually, that should be yes. Okay. We see here on the database that there's no document saved so far to Sync Gateway. Now let's run the app again. So we have two lists, and now the documents were synced. We can click on the document, see that there's a title, and that's essentially the only property. The ID was generated by Couchbase Lite, and the revision is also generated by Couchbase Lite. That's essentially for managing the replication, knowing which updates of the documents have already been saved and replicated. So the equivalent with the Datastore API would have been the deltas. And it's also very useful for conflict resolution, but we won't go into too much detail about this now. So now we have the documents pushed to Sync Gateway. We also would want to have them pulled so that when other users push, we can pull. So back in the did finish launching with options method, we will add a second replication. Let's add it here. Call it pull, and use the create pull replication, passing in the same sync URL. Also set continuous to be true because the default is false, and start it. So we still have two lists. Nothing will change because the only client here that's pushing and pulling as well is this app. So what we can do is create a new document. There's still two documents. We can add a new list using the REST API. I'm going to use Postman, but you can use any HTTP client to do that. Sorry, no. And here, the same URL as the replication URL. And we have two options. We can send a put request, which means we will have to pass in an ID here for the document, or we can send a post request, which means that Sync Gateway will generate the ID in the same way that Couchbase Lite did in our previous examples. We'll use post, and in the body of the request, we can set the title to, let's say, groceries. We don't need this, just a content type. We get back a OK true, so the documents was saved successfully. So we now have three documents. That's the groceries list, and the groceries was pulled down from Sync Gateway. So yeah, that's essentially it. You can update your documents from the REST API or from a replication protocol that happens on the SDKs that implement it. So that's on native platforms, Android and iOS. And on the web, you can actually use PouchDB for the replication protocol. The database that syncs. PouchDB is an open source JavaScript database inspired by CouchDB that is designed to run well within the browser. And in the same way PouchDB can replicate to CouchDB, it can also replicate to Sync Gateway. So you have two options when you build the client for the web. You can use the REST API, which is available on Sync Gateway itself, or you can use the replication protocol, but I wouldn't recommend you to re-implement that in the browser. You can use PouchDB for that, which is an awesome tool and library. One last thing I'd like to mention is the other features that we haven't covered here, which is the filtered sync and user management, because that's obviously really important to your application. The sync function here is a three-liner. It's the default sync function. If I open up Sublime, if I open up, I will open up the admin party JSON. Here, that's the sing function, and that's the same here. So you can change the sing function here, and you essentially have a few functions, access and role, and then the equivalent functions for data validation, so require access, require role, and but I won't go into detail, but essentially this allows you to do all the filtering so that different users logged in replicate different data. And in the develop sections, you have here awesome guides on the Couchbase Lite section to help understand more about replication. Yeah, there's also the Sing Gateway guides. So for instance, the Sing function API, which give a lot more insight into which function you can use to perform which action on your data. So yeah, really recommend you to go check out developer.couchbase.com/mobile.